Well, good morning, everyone. Feels like spring is in the air. Just kidding, bad climate joke. Terrific to have everyone here today for the signing of a landmark executive order that is setting the tone for a whole-of-government approach to implement common sense measures to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and better protect our communities from the impacts of accelerating climate change. This year was a year when we saw climate change really speeding up right here in Connecticut. We experienced heat waves in May that closed schools. We experienced torrential rainfalls that flooded streets, overwhelmed cars, caused loss of life and loss of economic activity. And we know that these changes to our climate are only going to be worsening as the years go forward. But this is also a year, 2021, when we saw our response to climate change accelerate here in Connecticut and in this country. In January, I'm so proud that the Governor's Council on Climate Change produced a report delivered to the Governor's desk with 61 recommendations for near-term actions that the state of Connecticut could take to help accelerate our progress in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and protecting communities from the impacts of climate change. It's also a year when we saw the introduction of landmark climate legislation, again, to achieve those various ends and to seek to implement many of the GT3 recommendations. And it's a year when we saw federal enactment of a bipartisan infrastructure law that's going to be delivering billions of dollars of investment in climate resilience infrastructure, in clean transportation, in a modern and more resilient electric grid, as well as expansion of broadband and clean water investments. All of these infrastructure investments are going to help to achieve many of our climate goals. This executive order cements much of our response to climate change. It lays out a whole-of-government approach to ensure that all of the agencies in this administration are rowing in the same direction, that we're coordinating effectively so that we can deliver on our climate agenda. I'm so excited about the responsibilities that DEEP will be taking on across our agency as part of this executive order, including establishing a Connecticut Equity and Environmental Justice Advisory Council within DEEP. We know how important working with frontline communities is in our response to climate change, as they are the ones getting hit first and worst by the impacts of climate. DEEP will also be co-chairing the state's first Connecticut Clean Economy Council together with the Department of Economic and Community Development. We know how Connecticut has already been a leader in accelerating business development that's delivering clean transportation, clean energy solutions. We're excited to achieve that expansion of our economy and workforce opportunities as we respond to climate change. Under this executive order, DEEP will also be developing appliance standards and high-performance building codes that deliver energy savings for middle-class families, for citizens and businesses all across our state. We know how urgent that is at this moment of high increasing energy costs. We'll also be deploying a community air quality monitoring program, assessing the California medium and heavy-duty vehicle emission standards for adoption here in Connecticut, launching a community climate resilience grant program, and so many other contributions. But I'm equally excited that this executive order captures similarly impactful contributions and commitments from across all state agencies in the areas of building and infrastructure, clean transportation, community climate resilience, health, equity, and environmental justice, jobs in the economy, and natural and working plans. This truly is an effort that will require all of us to be engaged. And that includes not just state agencies, but through this executive order, more support and coordination with our municipal partners, with regional entities, with our labor partners and others. We know that this is the crisis of our time, and it calls on all of us to get involved and get engaged. I just want to thank all of the members of the Governor's Council on Climate Change, including many of my fellow commissioners, as well as more than 200 stakeholders, experts, business leaders, and advocates who worked on developing many of the recommendations that are reflected in this executive order, and the hundreds and hundreds of members of the public who got involved, shared their comments, shared their visions. This accomplishment of this executive order reflects all of their input. I do want to say, because folks will ask the question, within this executive order, will this solve climate change? Will this ensure that we meet our Global Warming Solutions Act goals? Well, no, this executive order is reflecting all of the actions that we can take with the tools that the executive branch has to ensure that we make further progress towards that target. It's incumbent on us to do so. This past September, I joined Governor Lamont down at Silver Sand State Park, where we delivered the most recent progress report on Connecticut's implementation of the Global Warming Solutions Act, which sets a target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030. And it's clear from that progress report that we have more work to do in the area of, particularly in the transportation sector, which is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in our state and the overwhelming source of air pollution generated here in our state, as well as in the building sector, where we continue to see emissions climbing. We need to make more progress in those sectors, and we will not be able to reach those 2030 targets unless we have additional tools authorized by the legislature to do so. And we look forward to continuing to work together with our legislative partners to make progress on implementing those solutions. But in the meantime, I think folks in reviewing this executive order can see that under Governor Lamont's leadership, we are doing everything that we can, applying all of the tools that the executive branch has to ensure we can contribute to meeting those targets for 2030, as well as to better protect communities from the impacts of climate change. I'll also say this is a moment when we are preparing excitedly for the implementation of the federal bipartisan infrastructure law. It's going to be driving enormous amounts of investment and activity in infrastructure all across our state. And many of the elements of this executive order ensure that our agencies are working together to deliver those investments fast, but also smart. And that we will ensure that we have a climate lens applied to how we are delivering those infrastructure investments, so that we are ensuring that we're investing in infrastructure that's not only reducing harmful air pollution, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also is prepared to withstand the accelerating impacts and changing impacts of climate as we go forward. And here to speak more about that is Deputy Commissioner Garrett Eucalito, who's been a great partner at the Department of Transportation and will be at the center of making a lot of those infrastructure investments and delivering on many of the elements under this executive order.
Thank you, Katie. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Connecticut Department of Transportation. I want to start by thanking all my colleagues at Department of Energy and Environmental Protection and the DOT and the Governor's Office and our other state agencies who worked so hard to craft this executive order. And without their work, we would not be here today. So thank you. And for those not actively involved in climate discussions on a day-to-day basis, you might be wondering why the DOT is here for this discussion. I think Katie hit the nail on the head when she talked about transportation being the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Connecticut. It's 38% of our state's greenhouse gas emissions. We also are a significant owner of infrastructure in our state that is vulnerable to climate change impacts. We have to maintain that infrastructure and ensure it exists in a safe fashion for years to come. We know at the DOT that past investments by the federal government and state government may have had a deleterious impact on communities and on our environment. We know that the age of the automobile has accelerated climate change, and we need to do more to address that. Provisions in this executive order will help us achieve our goal of becoming, at the DOT, the potentially greatest solution to fighting climate change instead of the greatest source of greenhouse gas emissions. We want to make Connecticut a more equitable place to live and to flourish and to learn. So for all of us at the DOT, we're looking at the opportunities in this executive order to electrify our entire public transit fleet, to look at our significant amount of culverts and other infrastructure that's susceptible to increased rainfall events, identifying those vulnerable assets, and also looking how we can reduce the miles driven on our roadways. How can we get people out of their cars into other sustainable modes of transportation? We know we can't address transportation inequities and the climate crisis just through these transportation projects. but we also need our sister agencies and local partners to partner with us on this, and that's why we're excited about this executive order. In Connecticut, our families and businesses can continue to thrive with a clean, sustainable, and safe transportation system. So I want to thank the governor for leading on this issue and continuing to push us at the DOT to think about that as we're making our investments in transportation. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Commissioner Jutani from the Department of Public Health, who has been a great partner with us at the DOT on safety and in climate issues.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today on this really momentous occasion. It has been such a privilege to partner with my fellow commissioners and the governor on this initiative here today. For many people, you may wonder, why is public health concerned about climate? We have all seen extreme weather. That is not a surprise to any of us here in Connecticut. Look at what's happening to our fellow Americans around the country, what is going on in Kentucky right now. And the impacts of climate have a direct impact on health on a daily basis. Whether it be air pollution or forest fires on the West Coast that then impact our air quality right here, which then contributes to asthma rates and asthma exacerbations. And guess where it contributes it the most? Often in our communities with high social vulnerability. And so as we think about the impacts of climate on health, we need to specifically have an equity lens as we think about that, because those are our communities that are most impacted by it. When we have extreme weather events, we have instances of too much heat or too little heat, too much water or too little water. If you live in a basement apartment and there is flooding, who is most likely to be affected first? We are thrilled in the department to be establishing a program on climate and public health. This will be funded to start through a CDC grant called the BRACE grant. And we are going to be educating our young people about these impacts, working together on issues like asthma, air quality, and all these impacts of extreme weather. So I look forward to really advancing one of my priorities as a new commissioner in this department, which is at the intersection of health, climate, and equity, because it is our responsibility to own this challenge that is confronting us every day and protect those who often can't protect themselves. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Governor Lamont.
Thanks, Manisha. Good morning, everybody. You may be wondering what we're doing outside here in December, but given where we are in the COVID infection, when you can be cautious, be cautious. And it's ironic we're talking about climate change. I'm a little happy it's not that cold out here today. This is what we're trying to do with this executive order. One of the things you find about democracies is we're pretty good at responding to emergencies, but we're not as good when it comes to looking around the corner. And I think we're a little slow on COVID, and frankly, I think we've been a little slow on climate change as well. And we've got a lot of catching up to do. And what we weren't able to do through legislation here in Connecticut over the last year or two, we're taking the lead right now with this executive order. And it's really important that we lead by example. State government leads by example. One of the first things we're going to do in this bill is look at all the public buildings we have all around us and around the state and bring them up to where we ought to be in terms of efficiency, where we ought to be in terms of bringing down the high cost of energy to do that, what we can do to provide solar panels and other renewable, bring our buildings to where they ought to be, and lead by example. Physician, heal thyself. That's the first thing that we're trying to do. This is all the government above. We need all of government involved in this to take the lead, and we need the business sector as well. Garrett and Joe and the team at DOT, you say, well, what is DOT doing here? Well, I can tell you that number one source of pollution right now is our transportation system. Connecticut's doing really well when it comes to the electric grid. We're doing really well when it comes to getting zero carbon on our electric grid, over the next 10, 15 years. It's enormous. We're taking a lead there and what that's going to mean. Right now, the biggest source of pollution we have is our transportation system. And we're moving our transportation to all electric. And you may say, oh boy, that sounds really progressive, and Bernie Sanders this is the market calling for us to do this. This is extraordinarily important that we do this right now. You maybe notice that the most valuable car company in the world provides all electric vehicles. You maybe notice that General Motors recently said they're going to produce nothing but all electric vehicles by 2035. This is what the market is calling for, and our job is to make sure that Connecticut is ready. And transportation is doing that thanks to a lot of federal support. We're going to have $50–60 million in EV charging stations all up and down our major corridors, 91, 95, 84, making it easier for you to make that transition. The cost of EVs, electric vehicles, is coming way down. There's a $7,500 credit, making it even more competitive. And what's most interesting to me now is there's now a big market or growing market for secondhand electric vehicles. That means the price is coming down even more. I think we're going to have an acceleration in terms of moving to an all-electric transportation system. And along the way, Garrett, Joe, and the team are doing everything we can to make our train system faster, easier to get people out of their automobiles. And it's not just a smart thing to do, it's the right thing to do. I mean, we as a state are spending well over $100 million a year on asthma. We're one of the healthiest states in the country, but not when it comes to air pollution, not when it comes to transportation-related air pollution, not when it comes to those kids growing up next to 91 and 95 near those intersections who are twice as likely to suffer from asthma as folks that live in more rural communities. And that's why we're going to address this head on. As Katie said, we're taking the lead with our mayors and first selectmen as well. I've often said early money is like yeast. Emily, well, it's the same with environment. And we're putting in place some competitive grants so our municipalities are thinking about places where resilience is of most importance, where the flooding is most severe, so they can put in place the plans they need so we get in front of the federal money. We're the first in line to get that infrastructure money to make sure we prevent flooding across the way, what that means. You may wonder, what's everybody doing here behind me? Well, Brenda's here because of public safety. And public safety means going an inventory of all of our most high-risk assets that are in danger of flood. Look what happened in Sandy some years ago. For example, say the electric substations, where another 2 or 3 inches of Sandy and our lights would have gone out, and they would have gone out for a while. So it's not easy to make the commitment now to prevent something you don't see yet, but you know it's coming, and we're ready. We've got agriculture here. Brian is here. Look at what those rain bombs have done to agriculture, what that means in terms of our farms, what that means in terms of using our open space to be the lungs of our state going forward. We're a very dense, congested state, so it's really important that our open spaces be there to protect our clean air, and also make sure that our farms continue. If we found anything over this last couple of years, how important supply chain is, and our fresh Connecticut-produced farm is a big piece of what that supply chain is. Josh is here from insurance. What is insurance doing here? Look, can I tell you, you don't want to pay flood insurance rates, the likes of which you see down in Florida. They're paying a fortune. They're already going out for $1 billion bond to do resilience right now. They are paying hundreds of millions of dollars a year in Miami for pumping stations in case of flooding, all around their flood zone areas. We're in a much better position than that, but insurance is here reminding us that there are codes in place to prevent what's happening in Florida from happening here. Alexandra's here with the economic development, and I'm really, really proud that when companies are looking at the state of Connecticut, they say, I love the fact that so much of your electric is carbon-free. I love the fact that your prices are stable and it's consistent and reliable. You know, we worry a little bit about transportation, but I like the fact that you're making the investments in transportation to get people, you know, off the congested roads. We'll be doing a lot of that in our bond commission meeting next Tuesday. I don't know if I've forgotten anybody. I hope not. If I do, I'll hear about it. But I'll end where I started. Democracies are slow to act. When we act, we get it right. I'd like to think Connecticut is getting it right here. I'm really proud to be signing this executive order. I'm proud that the state government is leading by example. It's an all-of-government effort. I wish we had the mayors here. I wish we had chambers of commerce here, because we're going to make a big difference, and I hope people around the country are taking notice of our example. Thanks, everybody. Sign the bill?
Sign this thing.
I do one letter per pen.
It's made it easy this time.
We're being economical. If you get the whole this,
So we'll do all questions from the podium, okay, guys? Here, I'll take. Katie, I'll take it. That's the problem. I'll give you a Xerox, okay? It's fine. I'm sorry it's printed and we didn't do it on an iPad.
Governor, will you take the question?
sure. Yes, ma'am.
What is the fiscal note on this, and like where's the money going to come from for all these initiatives?
Connecticut's making a down payment, and we'll be able to leverage that tenfold with the infrastructure money. First of all, we have hundreds of millions of dollars for resilience, electric grid upgrade, and so that's what we're starting in. We have to do a little bit of bonding. I mean, we had some ways to pay for this on a more consistent basis, but politicians are a little more willing to bond, so we've got some bonding in place for transportation, bonding in place so we can start making our state vehicles all electric over the next 10, 15 years. So you'll see that in our bonding bill coming up on Tuesday as well. You know, overall, there's not a lot of operating revenues that we're going to need to support this, but there's some, and it's not significant.
Okay, but you'll get me the number, or somebody will get me the number, if that's what the total is.
Yeah, Johnny's got it.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
What you mentioned earlier that this order would do things that you weren't able to get done legislatively. Can you give us some of the examples of, I don't think TCI's in here, so, or am I wrong?
Well, I'll start and then hand it over to Katie. We had some plans to pay for transportation. It was a significant upgrade, cut down on our commute time, speed up our rail, transformative. We weren't able to get that paid for over the last couple of sessions. So what we're able to do now is through bonding, start making some down payments, and through the infrastructure bill coming in, make some of the most transformative investments in transportation that we've ever made. You know, last time around we were looking at a fee on pollutants, otherwise known as TCI. That would have been a recurring revenue source that would have allowed us to do that. We have to bond to pay for our share of what we've got to do, but there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars, Paul, for resilience, which is anti-flooding efforts and maintain that we can keep our grid safe. Just two examples of how we're able to take care of things, ourselves.
I'll say with respect to TCI, for example, there are some elements of this bill that I think are, or of this executive order that incorporate elements of the TCI program that we feel that we can do within existing authority. For example, part of the TCI legislation would have created an equity and environmental justice advisory body. To give input and have community engagement about climate mitigation investments. And so this executive, that's something that we could commit to and accomplish without legislation. We're establishing in this executive order a Connecticut Equity and Environmental Justice Advisory Council within DEEP to provide that kind of input on our implementation of our programs.
So what will this council's duties be? Can you give me an example of some things that this council is going to be tackling?
Sure. Well, we're looking forward to having input from this advisory council, for example, on how we roll out the air quality monitoring program that is also being established under this executive order. We know, as you heard from Commissioner Giuttani and from the governor, that communities that live adjacent to our transportation corridors are breathing air that's in many cases 20% higher in air pollution than in other communities. But we only have 14 air quality monitors around the state to track that. With this, the investments and this, the program and this executive order, we'll be able to expand air quality monitoring into communities, and especially provide more information and actionable information for communities overburdened with air pollution. We want to make sure that we have those communities at the table to help us craft that program, help bring this information and this kind of monitoring to their communities. But that's just one example. Yeah.
But you wouldn't be able to accomplish as much with this as you would with TCI, right?
I mean,
the funding isn't necessarily there.
Certainly, there obviously the permanent funding mechanism and the cap on carbon emissions, it was an element of TCI. Is not something we could do without legislation. But to the extent that I think the theme here is we're not meeting our 2030 targets. We know that there are things that the executive branch can do within existing authority, and we are, through this executive order, committing to make sure we're maximizing those opportunities, which is, that's reasonable for everyone to expect us to be doing.
Does it pressure the legislature then? I mean, does it pressure them to
That's not.
take further action? Or
We're focused on what we can do. And listen, the Governor's Council on Climate Change produced this report in January, 61 recommendations. Some of those need legislative action, but many of them were also things that could be done by the executive branch. If you look at our commitments around reducing emissions in state buildings and state fleets, in DOT's transit bus fleet, there's so many things that promulgating appliance standards, which is something that DEEP has existing authority to do and will save ratepayers billions of dollars and reduce emissions. We're focused on those elements, those recommendations that we have existing authority to do.
Just on the impact of the air quality, is that particular 14 people that are working on that?
14 air quality monitors in place around the state.
So
Equipment.
Equipment. So you'll be able to add more equipment.
Expand community air quality monitoring sensors in other locations around the state. Yeah.
I just want to make sure. Thank
You got it.
Governor, could I ask you a couple related questions? Does this mean TCI is dead at this point?
I don't think we're going to see it in this current session. I think you'll see it in the future.
I think the legislature dragged their feet on this because of lobbying by the energy and business industries.
I think so.
Did they lobby you to any extent? Were they trying to get you to drop the idea, or what kind of contact did you have with the business and energy communities?
We're not that chummy, so there wasn't that much contact.
What's not that much contact? Did you call at the house?
No. Look, let's face it. You saw tolls and TCI, you saw the oil and petroleum lobbyists standing right there at the protests. I mean, it was carefully orchestrated and they're pretty aggressive. I'm not their best friend. It's not forever that we're going to be captive to OPEC and Saudi Arabia and the oil lobby. At some point, we're going to be able to say we don't need your damn oil. But in the meantime, I'm doing everything I can to make the transition and make it smooth, and I think it's a key to our environmental future. And by the way, it's going to save folks an awful lot of money. They get out of their internal combustion cars, they start driving an EV. They don't have to go to that gas station, they don't have to spend $80 filling up, they don't have to curse the high price of gasoline. This is going to save middle-class drivers a lot of money, and even better, get into a train.
But isn't that sort of was the central issue with this? It wasn't just necessarily the industry opposition. By your own estimates, this would have added 5 to 10 cents to a gallon of gasoline over 10 years. Don't you think the sort of sticker?
Paul, the market has added about $1.50 per gallon of gasoline over the last 9 months or something. You're suggesting that, look, the petroleum producers would have just pushed this right onto the consumer. They could have or not. Anyway, we're not doing that now. We've got additional revenues to be able to take care of this out of the infrastructure bill, and we have to borrow a little bit to pay for our share.
Well, wouldn't you agree that additional cost, or the potential for that additional cost, was a factor in the resistance to this proposal?
I'd rephrase it this way. Why pay $4.50 a gallon? Get into an EV vehicle and you don't have to pay any of that, or at least have an 80% savings. That's how we're going to save middle-class drivers in the future.
Off topic, are we done with this? I just on off topic. Some of the restaurants didn't seem too happy about your digital health card that they call a passport. Have you had feedback with the restaurants and how this may impact them in an industry that hasn't been doing all that great?
If you want people going back to the restaurants, they got to feel safe. And one way you can make them feel safe is they know you're taking safety protocols really seriously. One way to make them feel safe is when you go into a restaurant and sit down, probably the person next to you feel confident has been vaccinated. And I'm not requiring anything. I'm not mandating anything. I'm giving stores and restaurants and businesses one more tool they need to make their employees and their customers feel safe. That's the best thing you can do for business.
Can you guarantee, I looked at the privacy policy for the company that's running the program for Connecticut, and it says that they're allowed to sell information to third-party vendors and advertisers.
We're not going to let that happen. That's the first I've heard about that. No way. HIPAA, privacy, not going to happen.
I think it's not going to be sold to, because their privacy policy says we can't take this information and we can't.
Not going to happen. Not going to let that happen. Won't do it if that's a risk.
And I think Rhode Island is going back towards mask mandates. You're saying you're not going down that path. You're not going down that road.
Right now, there's no need to do that. We have capacity in our hospitals, and people are doing the right thing. And Rhode Island's a little complicated. It's for facilities of over 200, so we're not there.
Commissioner, have you gotten today's numbers? Oh, I'm sorry.
Frankly, everybody's commissioner.
I'm sorry.
Numbers yet?
No, not yet. So I was going to say that was a short answer.
What are we hearing about Omicron? I think there was 11 cases at last count. Obviously, we'll get the surveillance report later today. Can you give us an idea what's happening on that?
So what we've definitely seen with Omicron, and as we are looking at what's happening in South Africa, in the UK, and right here in the United States, is that this variant is highly infectious, and it is moving rapidly throughout our state, throughout the country. And with some predictions that are out there, I won't be surprised at all if in another week, 2 weeks, it's roughly 50% of what's circulating, and in a month it could be the predominant strain overall. So we have yet to see how that is going to impact severity of disease. We don't know the answer to that yet. What I can tell you is that hospitalizations have been rising. They've been rising at a rate that is concerning to me, and we're watching it very, very closely. So far, the majority has been Delta that we know of. But as we know, this is moving, and it's a moving target. It's going to continue to move. And as you mentioned, we will have more of a sense later today on what proportion Omicron is of our circulating isolates that are in Connecticut. So we have to watch this carefully. We don't know the exact impact it's going to have on what I think is the number one metric for us to be watching at this point, which is hospital numbers. And it's really a combination of hospital numbers, of COVID patients, but also of all patients. We have to understand where we are in healthcare now relative to where we were a year ago. We are much better off than we were a year ago. But we have staffing issues because healthcare workers have been working really hard for almost 2 years. We have issues related to variants that are going to come and go, and vaccination status of people. We have issues related to mental health in our communities and people needing to be in the hospital for those issues. And then we have medical and surgical problems that are coming to a head for many people because they were sitting on the sidelines afraid of this virus. So we have a community that is in need of health care. And we're seeing it at multiple levels. So really looking at hospital numbers of COVID patients and other patients is the thing I'm going to be focused on most closely going forward.
Can you give us an update on childhood vaccines for the age 5 through 11? Is the trend that they're getting vaccinated? And what is the hospitalization rate among that population?
So the hospitalization rate among children continues to remain low. We are approaching 30% vaccinated for our 5 to 11-year-olds. That's the most recent number I saw yesterday. And I think that we are continuing to make progress in that front. We knew at the beginning of all of this that 30% of parents were going to go out immediately and get their kids vaccinated. And the other 30% were going to see how their friends did and probably get vaccinated after that. And that's the group that I'm really trying to work on now as we continue to get parents on board and get them vaccinated. And we will continue our efforts with our DPH yellow cards and other partners, pharmacy partners, pediatricians, to get people throughout the state vaccinated.
Governor, can I ask you about, you talked a little bit about this yesterday when you mentioned, mandates seem to invite pushback. Is there like a coronavirus mandate to be here in Connecticut? I mean, do you think the public would accept the kind of sweeping orders that you issue?
I don't think they would, and I don't think they're needed. Listen to what Manisha just said. Ages 5 to 11, getting folks vaccinated. That's your kid. Maybe not everybody wanted to do that in the first week or two. And some had a little bit of a wait and see. I could mandate that. I could say everybody's got to do it. And I think the pushback would be severe, and I understand it. And frankly, it's an emergency use authorization as well. But we're going from 30% to 60%. Remember, Paul, how it was with the nurses in the nursing homes or bus drivers. Oh, no, we're not going to do it. And then over time, people felt more confident and stepped up to do it. I'd like to think Connecticut's feeling more confident and can step up and do the right thing without mandates. Thanks, everybody.